What is going on today, everybody? It's Buddy, and in this video I'm going to show you guys how I took this damaged and poorly running Toyota Camry and turned it into thousands of dollars of profit. And if you're new to the channel, my name is Buddy and I buy and sell cars for a living full time. And in this video I'm going to show you guys exactly how I made thousands of dollars off this Toyota by going over how much I knew I should buy it for, how much money I had to put into fixing it, and ultimately how much profit I made. So without further ado, let's jump right into the video. So I was looking at some new listings on Facebook Marketplace when this white Toyota Camry came across my screen and caught my attention. It was a 2012 Toyota Camry with only 100,000 miles, listed for just $4,700. Now I know from experience that a 2012 Camry with about 100,000 miles is going to be a $9,000 to $10,000 car all day every day if it's in good condition. So I clicked on the listing to see exactly what's going on here. And as you can see from the first picture, the car literally had a missing headlight and a missing front grille. It also looked like in the other pictures that the bumper was sagging a little bit. Now if you zoom up here, you can see a little bit of damaged paint right here by the windshield as well. It looks like a bad factory paint job done by Honda, and it's just straight up delamination. Now the interior seemed to be in decent condition. Now I couldn't tell from the pictures all entirely, but there was no rips or tears in the seats. The dash seemed pretty decent, so it looked like it was in okay condition on the interior, just needed a lot of work on the exterior. So let's take a look at the description and see exactly what the story with this car was. The description read, was in a fender bender. Car also runs rough when running and sometimes won't start. Great mechanic special. Okay, so my first thought on this car was no, and probably no. No, it sounds like way too many problems. A smashed front end, it's got engine issues, the paint had some delamination. On top of that, they're asking almost $5,000. But I did notice it was a super new listing and quite possibly was in better shape than I anticipated. Now, if it was listed for a long time, and I know a lot of people have already looked at this car and they haven't made a deal on it already, it's definitely not worth it. And a huge rule of thumb is good deals go super quick on Marketplace. So you have to be quick to the punch. But I didn't have any plans today, and lucky for me, the car was only a few miles away, so I figured I'd at least message the seller and see if I can find some more info. Now, the seller stated that the accident with this car was not reported due to them rear-ending a trailer hitch, so there was probably no damage to the other person's car, which was a plus since it would have a clean Carfax report. They also told me they pulled the damaged parts off and they were going to fix it, but they didn't have time since the engine issues started up, and they essentially just gave up on the car altogether. So me and the seller scheduled the time that would work for the both of us, and we set off to see this car in person. Now that we're on the way to see the car, a couple things I want to talk about. One thing being extremely important is knowing how to look at a used car before you buy it. You got to know how to inspect it and make sure you don't get ripped off. Now I have 3 super detailed long form videos that cover almost anything that you should look for and know before you buy a used car. I'll leave those videos in the description below, and with 3 OBD readers that I will recommend for you guys, all at different price points. An OBD reader is an absolute must when going to look at a used car. And honestly, just having one in your garage, whether you're buying a car or not, I think is a must. Now, one last thing. Remember when I told you that good deals do not last long on Marketplace? I was actually able to message the seller faster than all the other flippers in my area because I got an alert from SWOOPA within seconds of this ad being posted. I've been doing this for years, and I think probably the most important thing for getting profitable flips is to get to the ads first. It's guaranteed that any car ad on Marketplace underpriced by a few $1,000s will be pending in literally minutes. So a tool that I personally use for car dealers and pro flippers is an app called SWOOPA. It also shows you the estimated value of the cars in the feed, so you can see at a glance if the price is a bad deal, a good deal, or a steal, so you can act in seconds. Now here's how you set it up. Just add the location, select the platform, and then select all cars or whatever you're looking for. Then like I said, SWOOPA is going to do the rest for you, looking on Facebook Marketplace, OfferUp, Craigslist, and you can filter your results by mileage, year, make, model, and the app will even block dealers, as these posts will never be good deals. Now after everything's set up, SWOOPA will continually search Marketplace every minute and ping you with an alert. You'll get pinged with cars all day, and when a deal is underpriced, you can message the seller first before the other 50 flippers in your area hit them up. You can either scroll 24/7 on Marketplace, or you can just message them in seconds when you get the notification from SWOOPA. And you do have to pay money to use it, but in my opinion, it's definitely worth it, and you're going to make your money back tenfold. The app also works for things besides cars like iPhones, couches, photography equipment, and all kinds of things that you can flip and make a side hustle doing. I've shouted out companies and websites for car shopping, car part shopping, but I genuinely believe this is the absolute best company I've ever promoted on my channel. It's literally made by flippers for flippers. There's a link in the description where only my viewers will get a free trial, so go ahead and check them out. So after a few minutes of driving, we finally arrived here at the seller's house. I was kind of worried about the paint being really bad because of that initial picture that you could see the delamination, but it seemed to be in actually pretty good shape all over. Obviously, you can see it had some bad delamination on the pillar like we talked about on the passenger side, and if you look on the driver's side as well, you can see the same thing starting to happen. It was very strange that the paint was in really good shape everywhere else besides just these two spots. Now, going up closer to the front end where it was missing the headlight and the grille and I had that initial damage, I definitely wanted to see if there was any damage to the frame or if it was just the grille and the headlight that got damaged. Now, you can see here, this is all the headlight wiring that was wrapped up in a grocery bag. I guess the seller did this to keep the water out when it rained. Not a very foolproof idea, but it looked like it at least worked a little bit. Now, taking a look at the frame, you can see all these metal pieces here that I'm pointing at, they're straight and they're not bent and dented. So in theory, putting a new headlight and a grille should be fairly easy, and I should be able to attach it to the car without any issues. Also, there's a plastic cover that goes here over the radiator. It seemed to be missing as well. I'm sure it was damaged, but the radiator seemed fine. It didn't seem damaged, so I guess the trailer hitch didn't mess up too much stuff under the hood, and it wouldn't be too much of a nightmare fixing. At least that's what I think. Now, taking a peek under the car, I can see that there was a skid plate that was also sagging. I'm pretty sure this was from the same incident with someone smashing into the trailer hitch. Now, the plastic did seem to be a little bent out of shape, but it's not all busted up and cracked, and I think I'll be able to repair it without having to spend money on a new skid plate. Now, it's time to check out the inside of this Camry, and I was actually pretty happy with how the interior looked. There was no rips in the seats, no bad leather fading, nothing that's unrepairable to say the least, just some nasty stains on the floor mats and some minor staining on the seats. The door jambs were also super dirty, probably haven't been cleaned since the guy bought this car who knows how many years ago. But all in all, nothing that a good thorough detail can't fix up. So now that we're in the car, I try to use the key fob to lock and unlock the doors, and come to find out it does absolutely nothing. Even being this close to the car, it still does nothing. I can also see that it is doing what the description was stating earlier, saying that it doesn't always start when I hit the brake pedal and push the start button. I also noticed that it has a key symbol on the dash and also a security light popping up. So what I'm thinking is the reason that it's not starting all the time, it is not reading the key. So what I did was I just moved the key fob around slowly and close to the button, and then all of a sudden it read the key and I was able to start the car. Now, as you can see here, when the car started, it died right away. Like it started and then died instantly. So I at least know that the transponder and the key works okay, and I'm like 90% sure at this point that the battery and the key is just super dead. All it needs is a battery and it will start every time. But the engine dying as soon as I turned it on was definitely not related to the key. Now, I got it to turn on again, and when I gave it a steady amount of gas with consistent pressure on the gas pedal, I was able to keep the car running and it wouldn't die right away like it did. Now, if I took my foot off the gas pedal for more than a second or two, it would shut right off. Now, also, when I got the car running, I noticed there was a check engine light. Now, there's definitely something going on under the hood of this car, and I was actually able to get it running long enough to take it for a little test drive. I just had to keep a little bit of constant pressure on that gas pedal and not let it off on the way when I came to complete stops. I was pretty much driving with 2 feet at this point. Now, it seemed to shift okay. I didn't feel any suspension issues or any weird noises. The only noise I heard was the grinding noise of the skid plate. Remember, it was ripped up under the car. But other than that, the car actually drove pretty decent. It just has some kind of engine issue. Now, the last thing to do was to hook up the OBD reader to the car and check what that engine light was telling us. It came back as a code P0113, which is the intake air temperature circuit voltage is not in spec, and a P0102, which means the mass airflow sensor circuit is not in spec either. Both of these codes can definitely be caused by the same issue, because I know in certain vehicles the mass airflow sensor also takes the intake air temperature sensor, so that was probably related. I popped the hood at the seller's house to check for any obvious wiring issues or busted hoses that could create like a vacuum leak or something, but everything looked fine. The wires were all in good shape, the hoses were all in good shape, but it shouldn't be something too hard to figure out, and I definitely know it's an intake issue, so it's not a huge deal like the engine is just failing. So at this point, I was going to lowball the seller because obviously this thing has seen better days. Now, it needs a good amount of work, both cosmetically and mechanically. Now, I'm not 100% sure what's going on. Maybe the key fob isn't the issue, but it's a gamble with any used car you get. Now, double checking the blue book value of this car and cross-referencing cars like this in good shape on Marketplace, I figured I could sell this thing for around $9,000. But considering it needs so much work, I think $4,000 is what I really want to pay for it. But of course, I'm going to try and get it for less. $4,000 is going to make me shake his hand, but you always want to go for less. Now it's listed at $4,700, and I know even at that I can probably still make a little bit of money, but I'm gonna lowball the seller and see what I can do. So I told him, well, you know, it's not running good. It needs a lot of cosmetic work. Touch-up paint alone is gonna be $700 if I take it to a professional. So within reason, I think your car is worth around $3,000 as it sits. Now at this point, I do recall him staying kind of quiet and just thinking quietly for a second. He thought it over for like 10 to 15 seconds in silence, and after him watching me inspect his car and pull everything out and get my OBD reader out for like 40 minutes going up and down his car inspecting it, he knew that I definitely knew what I was talking about, and I wasn't just coming over real quick and hammering him with some crazy low ball. I actually took my time to see what's wrong with the car. He did counter with $3,500, and I countered back, meeting in the middle at $3,250. I can tell he wanted more, but he was overall happy to just get this Camry out of his yard and to get a little cash in his pocket. So we officially got our next project car. Let's get this thing back to the house and get it ready for its new owner. Now, while we're on the way back to the house, I want to mention something real quick. So for the last few months, I've actually been putting together a car flipping course for you guys on my channel who really want to learn the ins and outs of how to make money flipping cars. Now, I know a lot of you guys just love the YouTube videos and don't want to get into car flipping, and you just watch these for entertainment purposes and to learn a little something. But for the few of you guys who want access to a really cool community where we help each other make money flipping, and where I really dive deep into all the details, the tricks, and all the stuff you won't find on YouTube to be a successful car flipping, because let's be honest, it's going to be all those little details that aren't that entertaining, and I assure you it's packed with all the knowledge I've collected in my head for over the last 7 years or so of car flipping. And you'll get access to group coaching calls with me personally, and I'll also personally work with some people one-on-one to help make sure you guys are successful making $1,000 a month flipping cars. I'll leave all that info in the description below if you guys want to check that out. So we finally got this thing back to the house. I'm not gonna lie, it did shut off a few times at traffic lights from me not putting enough pressure on the gas pedal, but thank goodness we got this thing back in one piece. So you guys know how I do it. We're gonna make a to-do list of everything on this car that needs to be fixed up, and I always start with the mechanical issues. So let's go ahead and get this engine running smooth again and get that check engine light shut off. So going back to that engine code P0102, in simple terms, it means the mass airflow sensor voltage is off, and an engine needs the proper fuel to air ratio in order to run correctly. The mass airflow sensor measures the amount of air going into the engine, so the car's computer knows exactly how much fuel to spray into the cylinders so the engine runs perfect. Now, this is why it kept shutting off at traffic lights and at stop signs, because the engine has no idea how much air it's getting, so it's just guessing how much fuel to pump into it. So what happens most of the time is that the airflow sensors just go out and stop doing their jobs. So I went and hit Advanced Auto Parts, and I picked up a brand new sensor. I was like 90% sure it was a sensor, and the wiring and the harness and everything looked good at the seller's house. So I'm just gonna guess and put my bet that the airflow sensor is the thing that went bad. So there's just 2 screws holding in the airflow sensor right here. You can see these come out very easily. Unplug the wiring harness, and once these screws are out, we can pull out the old one, and all we got to do is fit the new one in place, screw it down, hook up the wiring harness back in, and see if we fix the issue. So I started the car, I took it around the block, and let me tell you, I was so happy when I found it ran absolutely perfect. No putters, no engine dying at the stop signs, none of that stuff. The check engine light, when I reset it, it didn't come back on. So we can go ahead and we can check the engine issues off the list, and now we can go ahead and see why it's not starting every time and see if the key fob is really our issue. But first, let's go to our money invested chart to start tracking how much money we're gonna have to put into this project car. We have $3,250 for the price of the car, of course, and $113 for the mass airflow sensor that we got at Advanced Auto Parts. So let's move on to see what's going on with this key fob. So obviously you can go to the store and buy a key battery or go online or whatever and swap the battery out yourself, but lately I've just been going to the battery store and letting them do it for me. I've broken a few key fobs in my days opening these things and chipping the plastic or whatever, so I just let them do it since they have so much practice doing it all day every day. So after letting the tech work for a minute or two on the key, I was able to pay, and since I come here so often, they do give me a pretty good hookup, so it was only $6 just for the price of the battery. And after the battery was in, you can see the lock and unlock buttons work again, so that's really good news. Also, you don't have to wait forever for the car to recognize the key. As soon as the key was in the car, it starts right up, so that was the issue in the first place. It starts every single time. Let's cross off fixing the key off the list, and technically that was all the mechanical issues with this Camry. Now it's running great, and it starts every single time you push the button. So we have a lot of work to do on the exterior of this car, so let's start with that sagging skid plate. So the first thing we got to do with this skid plate is get the front end off the ground so we can really see what's going on underneath this car. And if we can salvage that plastic skid plate, we're going to save us a little bit of money here. So instead of using a jack in the front end of the car to get it really high off the ground, we're going to use the ramps. That way it's not in our way. It's not as high off the ground, doesn't give us as much room, but there's also not going to be a big old cumbersome jack in the way. So I squeezed in there, and you can see once I was under there, it was just some busted retainer clips. The plastic was slightly bent, but not bad enough that I couldn't fix it here with some clips. So I got my little box of different retaining clips until I found the one that fit, and I was able with some force to push these clips in and get this skid plate back on track. Now with the skid plate secured and looking all pretty again, we can go ahead and cross this off the list and move on to the next thing, and that was to start rebuilding the front end of this car. And we're going to start with finding a headlight housing. So with a little search on eBay, I was able to find a used one that wasn't broken in any way for $78. They had some brand new aftermarket ones for actually even cheaper, but this is an OEM one, so it is a factory built Toyota one, and I wanted to make sure it did match perfectly with the other OEM one. So in a few days it arrived in a big box. I popped the box open and I pulled out the headlight housing, and I was actually super stoked to see that the seller actually taped a Ziploc bag of all the screws that I needed to secure the new headlight. That way I don't have to go to search for screws, I can just use these ones, which was awesome. So the first thing I did was attach the lights to the headlight housing, all the bulbs and everything, and now that the bulbs are in place, it was time to wiggle it around until I got it to sit perfectly in place where I wanted it. Then once I had it in place, there was one bolt tucked here under the side of the bumper, and at that point I was able to snap the bumper back in place, and with all we had left was the 3 bolts on the top of the headlight. And once I got those in place, the last thing to do is check and see if the hood closed, and it closed perfectly and the headlight was sitting beautifully. So we can go ahead and cross off replacing the headlight off the list and move on to finishing the front end and installing a new grille. But first, let's jump back to our money invested chart and add a few things. We have $6 for the price of the key fob battery, of course, and then we have $80 for the price of the headlight housing. So I initially looked on eBay for a OEM, which means factory grille, but I also realized that this plastic part that goes over the radiator, I also need one of those as well. I mean, I guess you can call it a splash guard or a radiator cover. I don't really know the exact name of this part, but regardless, I think we need to go to a junkyard for this one so we can just get both at the same time. So I called around to see if any junkyards had a decent grill, and luckily for me, a junkyard had one of these cars in stock with almost all of the front end parts on it. Now, they actually threw this plastic piece in for free as well. They only charged me $50 for the grill since it wasn't really in the best shape, but also this car is not in perfect shape, so we didn't need a beautiful brand new grill. So now that I'm back from the junkyard with the grill, I wanted to get this thing cleaned off. Now, yeah, it's going to be covered by the grill, but since it's not on right now, I wanted to give it a quick wipe down with some rubbing alcohol and a microfiber cloth. And once it was clean, I started with the grill, which the bottom part just snaps into the built-in clips that are on the bumper of the car. And then I had some retaining clips holding the bottom of the grill in as well. So after the bottom of the grill was secured, I put the radiator cover plastic thing on top of the grill, and everything lined up beautifully. All I needed to do was get more retainer clips, and I snapped all those down, and that held the plastic piece to the grill, which also held it to the frame of the car. And after, I just needed to check and see if it all closed, and beautiful. As you can see, the hood closes. This car is back to life. I'm so happy with how this thing is turning out. That was much easier than I anticipated, but again, that's why we always check and make sure there's no bending on any of the metal framing. Now we can go ahead and cross off the grill off the list and move on. So now with the new grill installed, the only thing that stuck out to me on the front end of this car was how the new headlight was real shiny and the other headlight was a little bit yellowish and foggy. So in order for me to get the older headlight to match the new one, I needed to restore it. Now this is probably one of my favorite things to do, and luckily for you guys, I have a full-length video on my method I personally use for restoring headlights. Also, be sure to subscribe to my channel, so in case you don't remember to watch this headlight video, it'll probably pop up on your newsfeed. And of course, you don't want to miss the next car flipping video, so be sure to subscribe. So now you can see after I wipe down the headlight and get all that remaining polish off of it, it is nice and glassy. It's super shiny looking. It just sets the whole front of this car off. Now this thing is looking so much better than we first got it. So let's go ahead and cross off getting the headlight restored off the list and move on to the last thing we need to do on the exterior to really set this car off, and that was to paint those pillars that have all that paint peeling off of them. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a plastic trim removal tool, and I'm just going to chip off all the loose paint from this delamination point. And if I were to skip this step, it would just start chipping around my new paint job. It would be a huge waste of time, and you can really see how much bigger this bare metal spot's getting. I chipped a lot of paint. So I chipped away until I got to a point with the edges of the paint had a really good bond with the metal of the car, so I didn't really have to worry about it chipping any further. So now after chipping all the loose paint, it was time to sand everything down. Now I focused sanding on the the edges, feathering them down. That way there wasn't no lip between the edge of the paint and the bare metal of the car. Now, after it was all sanded down, I wiped the area nice and clean with rubbing alcohol to get all those fine dust particles and all the oils and all the other impurities off the paint to get it ready for the primer. But before I start priming, I definitely wanted to find some matching paint. Now, how you can find your paint code on a lot of these cars is by opening up the driver's door and finding the sticker that has the VIN on it. Now, you can see here the corner of the sticker, we got the paint code 070, and it's a super common paint code. So what we're going to do is we're going to look it up, and luckily for me, Duplicolor actually makes a can of spray paint with this paint already on it. Now, this is obviously not going to be ideal for huge panels or really nice cars that you want a beautiful paint job, but for a 13-year-old Camry with this kind of paint issues, I think this is going to be just fine. Now, before I lay down some primer, I had to mask everything off, the windshield, the hood, of course the door, the side mirrors, and just make sure I didn't get a bunch of overspray over the car and make a huge cleanup mess. Now, with the car all masked off and clean, I took a can of something called filler primer. I laid down 3 decent coats. Now, what this stuff is obviously to prime the car to make sure that the paint lays down good, but you can also build up a little bit of material with this primer, and you can sand it down to make sure you get any little ripples or imperfections and make your base coat for painting really nice and smooth. So after about 6 hours, I sanded it down with some 2000 grit fine sandpaper. I got everything beautifully smoothed down, and now it's time to start laying down some paint. Now, in hindsight, it was probably a much better idea to use some white primer because it took so many coats to cover this dark primer. So a thin coat at a time, I was able to actually get good coverage. I used the whole can of paint on this thing, and it blended decently with the existing paint. It was a pretty good color match. And now the last step after we got all the paint down was to finish it off with some decent quality clear coat. I gave it 3 decent layers of clear coat to seal off the paint to make sure there's going to be no peeling, it's protected from the sun, and any more delamination you can say goodbye to. And the finished result came out absolutely beautiful. You guys can see here that it matches so nice with the existing paint. It's nice and shiny. You would never know this thing was spray can painted. And after a few days of letting the clear coat fully cure in the sun, I took it to the car wash and I pre-scrubbed the rims before I ran it in the wash, and after, it came out absolutely amazing. The exterior looks so good, man. I'm really stoked with how this thing is looking. We're gonna get some nice beautiful shots of this car, and I think we'll be able to sell this pretty quick. Now, we're really close to having this thing sale ready, so let's make sure that we really detail this thing. So let's jump back to the money invested chart real quick. We're gonna add a few more things. We have $50 for the grill and plastic trim from the junkyard, and then we're gonna add another $30 for all the material of the spray can paint, and of course the materials we all use to mask it off and stuff. So since everything on the interior was in working order, there was nothing that needed to be fixed, all I needed to do was give this thing a really thorough detail. Now, with every thorough detail, I like to start by removing all 4 seats. Now, to remove seats, there's just 4 bolts that secure the seat to the car, 1 in each corner, and my large impact gun makes quick work of these bolts as they're pretty hard to remove by hand since they almost never get removed for the entire life of most vehicles, in fact. Now, with the seats removed, you can see how much easier it is to really get in there and deep clean these carpets. But first, what we got to do, we have to vacuum all the carpets up. So we're going to start here with the shop vac and thoroughly get all the dirt and random stuff that's deep embedded in the carpet. Now, I take about 15 minutes alone just to vacuum, just to make sure that I don't want my carpet cleaner getting all clogged up with a bunch of stuff. And after we're all vacuumed up, I take some cleaner and my little handheld pump sprayer, and I soak the entire carpet with a generous amount of cleaner. While focusing really good on those stained portions, I let it soak for about 5 minutes, and after about 5 minutes is up, I use a drill brush attachment to really work in the cleaner all deep into the fabric of this carpet. You can do this by hand with a regular brush, but with a drill attachment, it really speeds up the process and works out those stains really well. And once it's all worked in, I finish the job with my carpet cleaner. This thing sprays clean water, and then it sucks out all the years of built up dirt and stains and leaves the car with a really nice new fresh car smell. I also repeated the exact process on all the floor mats to make sure they look as beautiful as possible before they go back in. You can really see these floor mats took the brunt of all the dirt and grime because these floor mats had some nasty water coming out. Now it's time to work on the seats, and since the seats are leather, the process is a lot more simple. Especially having them outside of the car, it makes my life much easier. So I just soak them with the same cleaning solution, and I scrub them down with a brush and then wipe them down with a microfiber cloth. Now once the seats were done, I gave the interior, like the dash and the center console, a nice thorough wipe. Make sure I got all that gunk and that black stuff off of the door jambs. There's no way I'm going to leave these door jambs like that. And once everything was said and done and the seats were back inside, the interior of this car was looking absolutely amazing, all cleaned up. It's super nice. It smells like a brand new car, and now the interior is looking as beautiful as the exterior. And now the one last thing to do on the exterior before we call it quits was to take my rubber adhesive removal tool with the drill attachment, and I took off this tacky university sticker along with some old dealership sticker that probably came from the factory. This thing works absolutely amazing. It removes any sticker or any graphic in literally under a minute, no matter how dry rotted the stickers are. So with the last thing crossed off the list, this car runs absolutely perfect. The exterior is beautifully all fitted up with its brand new headlight and grille. The interior is super detailed, smells like a brand new car in there. This thing is ready for its new home. So it's time to snap some pictures of this thing and find a new owner. Now, I decided to list it at the book value of $10,000 in very good condition, which I would call this car very good condition. Kelley Blue Book says it's worth about 10 grand. And after a week passed with no good leads, which is normal for any used cars over $7,000, it's a different market. A lot of people who are searching for cars this expensive just go ahead and buy new cars. So what we did, I just dropped the price down to $9,400. And as soon as I did that, I got someone who seemed to be pretty interested. They showed up, they offered me $8,000. I respectfully declined, and instead of them leaving, I told them $8,800 is $1,200 off of Blue Book value. That is extremely fair, and there was no further need to negotiate. That is a very fair price for you. They agreed $8,800 was a great deal for everybody. Now, I'm sure I could have gotten the full $10,000 because that was the book value if I waited, of course, but I was happy with the profit margin, and I wanted to recoup my cash so I can put it into the next project. So now that we got the car sold for $8,800, it's time to jump back to the money invested chart to find out the total amount we have invested in this thing and see how much profit we actually made. Now, I did pay my friend $100 to help me detail this Camry, and he also held the camera for some of the shots when we were detailing, so he earned his $100. I'll also add another $100 for miscellaneous things like gas, detailing products, the few dollars I spent on the car wash, and random things that I may be forgetting. And when we add all this up, it comes to a grand total of $3,729, and with a sale price of $8,800, we have a total profit margin of $5,071. And now that is an absolute home run of a flip. I am super stoked with that. That is the best profit margin on all the car flip videos that I've done on this channel. So now let's do a little more math and see how many hours of labor went into this project so we can find out an hourly rate. So it took about an hour to diagnose and repair the mass airflow sensor. We have 30 minutes for driving up the road and getting the battery for the key fob swapped out. About another hour to get the car on the ramps and re-secure the skid plate. About an hour to reinstall the new headlight. Another hour to clean and install the new grille. 30 minutes to restore the old headlight, roughly about 3 hours to prep, prime, and paint the pillars, 5 hours to give this thing a nice thorough detail, and of course we're going to add another 6 hours of labor for miscellaneous things I might not be thinking of, like the pre-purchase inspection, part shopping, the drive time, and all that good stuff. And that comes out to a total amount of labor of 19 hours. Now we're going to divide the profit margin of $5,071 by 19 hours of labor, and that comes out to a grand total of $266 an hour. That is the most money per hour of any of the car flips on this series. A huge success in my book. I'm super happy. I was actually apprehensive in the beginning about even going to look at this car just based on the listing, but I'm glad I pulled the trigger. Now, like I said earlier, if you're serious about getting into car flipping, my course has some great videos. It goes into all the little nitty-gritty detail about how to be successful doing what I do. I'll leave all the information in the description. Also, a huge shout out to the SWOOPA app for being the official sponsor of this video. I'm telling you guys, this app is a game changer. I would not promote it if I didn't think so. The info will be in the description for this app as well. Leave a like so YouTube knows that I'm doing a good job making these videos for you guys, and also leave a comment. It helps out with the algorithm so YouTube can push out these videos that I work so hard on to the rest of the world. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys on the next car flipping video.